Right. Yeah. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Tony.
Thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast. I have been after you for a long time. So I know a bit about you, but for the listeners to come and the listeners that are here today, could you please say who you are and what it is that you do?
For sure. My name's Dan. I'm the founder and CEO of the Early Careers Company and Foundation. I founded both organizations at the start of last year. So depending on when this is listened to, that's January 4th, 2021. Prior to that, I, unsurprisingly, being on this podcast, didn't go to university. So when I was 18, I took a gap year. I was supposed to go off and do a degree, but took a gap year, got a job at a really small startup and ended up staying for 6 years. And then left during the first lockdown and set the company and foundation up 6 months later.
Great. Okay. So let's just go back in time a little bit to when you were at secondary school. So something I ask all my guests is, what are your memories of secondary school?
I really liked it. Never had much trouble. I grew up in North London. I was actually born, you'll have seen this for Tony's listeners, I was sitting in a different direction of my flat and there was a map of Borneo on the wall, which is actually where I was born. But moved back to North London, I think when I was 3 or 4, and spent, the rest of my life till I was 19 there. Went to my local state school. I had some difficulties at my first school. I was always, some of, I think the qualities that have made me, by some measures successful since leaving school were kind of my downfall at school. I was exactly as talkative and irritating then as I am now. And I didn't go down too well with a lot of my teachers. So I enjoyed it for the most part. Always had loads of friends, got on well with my work. I was never like the cool kid, I was never, playing football or anything like that. But yeah, I had a good time and enjoyed it overall. I got semi-kicked out of my first school. So I went to a school in North London, local comp, and ended up in, I have to phrase it, some disagreements with some teachers, I guess. My parents, being as kind of oppositional as I am, didn't want to back down and accept that it was all my fault, which in fairness, even on reflection, it really wasn't. It was actually them. So I left just before my GCSE exams. I didn't, I still did the exams, but they told me I wasn't coming back for sixth form. So I went to a different sixth form in my local area.
Right. Wow. How did you get on in your GCSEs?
Like academically?
Yeah. Did you get a brace of A's or a mixture?
Yeah,
or...
No. I got 7 A stars and 5 A's. I
nice.
did. God, that was ages ago, 10 years ago now. I did 3 sciences, maths, further maths, English, geography, history, electronic products, RS, and something else I can't remember. French. That was it.
Right. Très bien. So actually, despite what your teachers might have thought about your behaviour or, disruptive, talkative, you're exactly the kind of student they would have wanted academically.
Yeah, academically I was. It was funny, my mum always laughs that every single parent's evening started with, of course Daniel's getting straight A's, and it was always that every time. There were some teachers I specifically didn't get on with. I mean, similar to now, this is going to sound a little bit like, I don't know, self-aggrandizing, but I like to think of my company and foundation trying to change the way things are done and kind of challenge the status quo a bit. I don't believe the whole world is broken and everything needs to change the whole time, but you should always look to move things, whether it's around social mobility or kind of commercial activities, make things better and move things in the right direction. And I kind of saw it with that at school. I saw things that made absolutely no sense, It's a perfect example. I remember I got in loads of trouble because if you had 2 free periods in the morning, your lessons didn't start till 20 past 11, but I still had to come in at 8:45. Which is like, why am I traveling on a rush hour bus in the boiling heat, exhausted? What's the point of me doing that? So I just refused. And then, of course, they'd give me detention. So because they didn't want to be in school, they maybe tried to stay in school longer. And I just kept ignoring it until eventually it became a really big problem. But yeah, happy memories of school, like academically. I never really struggled. English was difficult for me. Which is funny because it's now my real strong suit. French was hard at one point. It was the only time in my entire life to date that my mum's put her foot down. She's like, you have to take a language. I was like, okay, fair enough. So those things are difficult. But apart from the teachers that didn't like me, school was a breeze, really.
Okay. And so you went to a different sixth form. What did you study there?
Biology, chemistry, physics, and French.
So what were you going to? What was in your on in your head then when you were making your selection? Did you have you off to be a scientist?
Neuroscience. My
Oh,
mum has worked with children with special educational needs her whole life. My dad's an engineer.
yeah,
We had quite a lot of emphasis on like being an expert and just being really, really good at, they're both right at the top of that. Well, dad doesn't work anymore, but they're both right at the top of their field.
yeah.
So yeah, the plan was, so the degree I was going to do after my gap year was neuroscience with French at UCL.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
That was the plan. Yeah.
Right. And did you get the grades necessary to get? Were you offered a place at UCL?
Yeah. I got 3 A stars and an A at A level.
Right. Okay.
So my plan was to go to Cambridge initially,
Yeah.
and then I took a gap year and
Yeah.
just realised I didn't want to go to Cambridge at
Yeah.
all. For context, I am pretty left wing, hence the social mobility charity. I at the time was like really left wing. I'd got involved with the Labour Party and so
Yeah.
on, and just didn't feel like I. Sorry, I have to open this. It's very hot in here. Didn't really feel like I kind of fit in an elite type university. Looking back on it, I probably would have enjoyed it, but didn't think it was right for me. So took the gap year, took initially a gap year internship at Wiser, my old company,
Yeah.
and then didn't leave. Turned down UCL and stayed.
And so I'm intrigued because you would be like that kind of poster boy for what a secondary school would say. It's like, you've got amazing grades, then you've done the right A levels, got amazing grades there, then you've got university offers, and you said, no, it's not for me. So what happened in your gap year that made you realise that uni was not for you?
I think it was part of the experience in my gap year. To be honest with you, when I got the job at my old company, even at that point, I didn't really know if university was for me. It wasn't that I was like destined to go. I deferred so I could have a lot more time to think about whether I wanted to go. I
Yeah.
will say, in fairness, my school were great. Like honestly, so I
Yeah.
went to a school called Ashmole for the sixth form, Ashmole Academy, just a local comprehensive school in Southgate in North London, where I'm from.
Yeah.
And they were brilliant. They were just like, do whatever you want, basically.
Yeah.
Obviously they tried to help and support and push you in the right direction. But
Yeah.
the difference between that and my first school was, I think probably because I went there, nearly as an adult and I'd grown up a bit. So I was a lot more mature and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I had like honest, open kind of adult dialogue with the teachers.
Yeah.
I think most of them kind of respected my ability to make my own decisions. I also come from like a really supportive family. So,
Yeah.
although my parents, actually, I think there's also a caveat that I've got two brothers. The top one went and got a first class engineering degree, became a pilot in the Air Force. And the middle one wasn't quite as kind of focused on the academics. He's still done very well. He's also an entrepreneur, runs a business in travel. I was with him doing a conference in Madeira on the weekend.
Yeah.
But Michael, my middle brother, had a big thing with my parents where he decided not to go to university, and I remember arguments in the house about it. So they've kind of gone through that already. And my parents, I think, having already brought my brothers are 11 and 9 years older than me, but having already brought up two boys, my parents kind of just like, there's no point trying to get him to stop smoking when he's 16, or trying to get him to go to university because it will just end in tears. But I was always brought up with, the confidence to believe I could do whatever I wanted, but also the knowledge that my parents would support me, whatever I chose to do. So it wasn't like a really hard thing going against the grain. It was just what I wanted. And my parents were a little bit, I think they're probably a little bit disappointed at the time.
Yeah.
They've got over it.
And I think you raised something that's so valid there. So my daughter's 16 and we're going through that process of just sort of figuring out, how do we best support her and allow her to make her own decisions. And I think you go through it that first time. And then for our son, it'd probably be easier for him because we'll have done it once. Yeah.
Yeah, it was all about keeping doors open. That's what my mum and dad were always focused on. Like, make the decisions now that allow you to, give you the maximum sort of freedom to make decisions in your life further down the line. So if you're not sure you want to go to university, still work really hard and get good A levels so you can change your mind. Don't close doors to yourself because you don't think you want to walk through them at this point. Try and keep as many options on the table as possible.
And just because we're talking about your parents a little bit, one thing that I noticed was in a post on LinkedIn, you tagged your mum, and I think you are my first guest where I know that one of your parents is on social media on a business networking platform.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dad's learned how to use WhatsApp as well. He still creates groups with people's names to talk to them, but he's getting there.
Yeah. Oh, I
And I can
see,
say
yeah.
that because there is no way he'll ever listen to this podcast
Yeah.
because he wouldn't know how to access it.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So is there anything you've learned from your parents' professions or their career stories that sort of informed how you, like you've talked about how they parent you, how has the way that they've built their careers influenced your view on the world?
Can I swear on your podcast?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think from both of them, there's no swearing in the first bit. You'll have to wait. So there's a couple of things. So the first thing is they both absolutely loved what they did. My
Yeah.
mum knew what she wanted to do when she was really young. She's always wanted to work with. She wanted to be a teacher of the deaf and wanted to work with kids with special needs and disabilities. And
Yeah.
that's what she's done her entire life. She
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. You know.
Yeah.
My dad was an engineer. He worked in the oil industry. He was a metallurgist and then like a quality assurance guy.
Yeah.
Used to look after sort of the quality of pipeline projects and drilling rigs and things like that. And they both absolutely loved it. It was always challenging. They've also both worked really hard.
Yeah.
I think honestly, this is kind of this is not a very woke comment at all, but I don't know. I worry that a lot of people in my generation aren't brought up with the mentality I am. I mean, it works brilliantly for me, but
Mm.
I kind of grew up with the mentality of like, especially in your 20s, like shut the fuck up, get your head down. I saw my parents always work 12+ hour days. My dad
Yeah.
used to do 12 to 14 hour days, 7-day weeks for 7 weeks in a row in
Yeah.
-30 in Siberia, on an oil project. My mum
Yeah.
used to manage hundreds of people or thousands of people looking after departments for local boroughs and really high pressure public sector roles. And,
Mm.
I was just always brought up that, do something you love. If you're happy and you're enjoying it, make sure it's getting you somewhere. But actually, if you become really, really good at what you do and you're A, talented, be hardworking and motivated, you'll end up being successful. I think I posted about this a couple of days ago on LinkedIn, but just people spend so much time thinking about the long game. My dad didn't plan to be a quality assurance manager in Siberia. He was initially a pipe fitter, but just did whatever he was doing really, really well and worked hard. And things end up being a little bit random the way they progress long term. But
Mm.
does that make
Yeah,
sense?
that does help. Yeah, it's really interesting. So you've gone from sixth form and you take a year out and then you go to work for your first company. What were you doing? What was your first job?
Recruiting, basically.
Okay.
It was a business called Wiser, so it was like a employer branding and recruitment business, basically.
Yeah.
I joined when it was really small, like just a handful of people there, and it was tiny. We were in an office about the size of my pokey flat. It was really fun. I mean, I've got nothing bad to say about them. Really enjoyed it for the first few years, at least. Business grew really quickly, and it was a small company. I met people I really liked. Some people I'm still really close friends with. One of my best mates, Omar, was the guy who hired me. We had the CEO and CTO and CFO of the business and so on, became people I spent loads and loads of time with. And at the time, I felt I'm going to learn more from these people and learn more doing this in the next 3 years. And also, I don't want to be a neuroscientist, but I do want to do something in business. I've always been really interested in the commercial world. I'd watch, Wall Street's not a very good example because they're all assholes, but you know what I mean? Like I'd watch a show about business when I was a little kid. I always found it really interesting. I got my mum to set up a like CFD trading account when I was like 15, and I used to like play around with foreign exchange, and I used to love all of that stuff. I used to read the Financial Times at like 12. I was such a fucking weird kid. And honestly, I don't know why I didn't take business at A-level thinking about it. But I always knew I wanted like a high pressure commercial career. I didn't know whether I wanted to work in banking. I was thinking law could be good. I was going to go down the route of like neuroscience, then law conversions, working. For some reason at 16, I wanted to be an intellectual property lawyer in a pharmaceutical company. Like I was literally like, I'm going to work in that GlaxoSmithKline building off the M4. I have no idea why I wanted to do that. I would have hated it. But I always had some sort of goal in mind.
And I'm absolutely like intrigued by the way your mind works, but also I guess there's that. It seems to me like you never felt constrained in any way. It's like, oh, I might do that, or I might do this, or I think this is a terrible idea, getting me to register for school when my lesson is at 11:15. So there's that.
I was never constrained, but I was always quite like committed to whatever I was doing, because I think a lot of people. You're right. I've never felt trapped. I've always felt like I've had a lot of freedom. yeah, I've always just thought if something makes sense and it's the right thing, then do it. And that's the whole thing. I mean, to sum up the university challenge, by the way, I love the name, absolutely
Thank you.
class.
Thank you.
But with to sum that whole debate up, it's like if you want to go to university, go to university. If you don't,
Yeah.
don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't if you don't feel pressured into it. And if you can't afford it, try and find a way of making it work. If it's something you want to do everything
Yeah.
you can to make it happen. And that's part of it. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but our charity has a grant fund, and we're going to be from next year supporting young people with the cost of university if they're struggling financially. So, I want to remove all barriers to access, remove as many barriers to access as possible, but it doesn't mean it's right for everyone.
No.
I will also say that while it was like, I might do this, I might do that, I'm not like a grass is greener kind of, I'm very committed. If, like when the going gets tough, it's no worries. I always think when things get challenging and things get hard, that's the time you need to stick with it and focus.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be someone, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever have a proper job again, but, I would have never have been someone that would leave a job after a year. Ever.
No.
Stay and make it work. It's always been my mentality. And it's not that it's wrong not to do that. It's just the way my head works is like keep going, and you can't be sure if you want something or not. So you've done it for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. So you spent a number of years at Wiser, and then you said you set up early careers during the pandemic, because why not?
Yeah. So I finished up at Wiser in that's funny. 2 years ago tomorrow, I
Wow.
agreed or like resigned / agreed to leave. I remember because I had to sign something. So it was 23rd of June 2020. I realized that it just wasn't quite right for me. I had some fractious relationships in the business. It just wasn't quite what I wanted to do. I didn't feel like the right path for me there. I also moved back to my parents in lockdown. I mean, to be honest with you, they wanted me to leave as well. Like that was made pretty clear. Like it wasn't me quitting. I mean, it partly was that, but it was, it was a pretty mutual thing. Like they made it pretty obvious they didn't want me there. Moved back to mum and dad's in the lockdown, and I began to feel like the work I was doing was a little bit like hollow, like I've come from really left-wing family. I'm a bit of a lefty myself, and I realized I had a big sort of commercial I've had quite a successful kind of commercial career, but I didn't really feel like I was helping anyone other than the people who worked with me in the business. So sorry, can you edit this out? Taya, can you grab the door? Sorry. Someone at the door, but I don't know who it is or what they want. Sorry, can you edit that out? Can you not?
I will try I can edit it out of the audio. On video, I mean, we'll work it out. It just shows that we're normal and we're having to work around things. Yeah.
Yeah, I never work from home. I wonder how many parcels I miss on an average day. I'd never work from home. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's fine. So you have moved back in with your parents. You've
Yeah,
decided
sorry,
that
so
you want to do something that's giving back more.
Yeah, I decided I wanted to do something a little bit more fulfilling. Decided I wanted to do something that was mine. Really wanted to like carve my own path. Make my own decisions. I agreed to leave. I then took 6 months off. So I finished up on the 17th of July and started my business on the 4th of January. I didn't really do anything in between. I mean, I did a lot of planning and stuff like that towards the end of it. So, sorry, I'm gonna have to get this. I
Let
don't know
me
what it is.
pause it. There. So we just took a little commercial break there, and we're back.
Commercial break for my brother to come into the flat and make a coffee.
Nice. Well, as long as he makes you one, I think we're okay, aren't we?
I don't think he's going to make me one. Yeah, go on. Right. Sorry, Tony. Where were we? So we were talking. Yeah. So I left that business. Took some time off. I got into jogging. Ate lots of cream cakes from Marks and Spencer. I loved it. So lockdown. Honestly, I don't need to shove this in the face. I know a lot of people really struggled, but I was incredibly fortunate. You mentioned I'm one of the only people who's been on your podcast that has a parent on LinkedIn. And that's because obviously part of the reason that I have my social mobility charity is because there's a massive like wealth divide. University is so much more accessible to those from middle class backgrounds. And if you're from a middle class background, you're more likely to have parents from LinkedIn. I am from a painfully middle class background. We shop at M&S, we go on 3 foreign holidays a year. I was very, very fortunate growing up, had a nice big house, nice big garden, but left-wing parents, local state school and so on. So I love going back. I go back to my parents almost every weekend. Like usually leave the office at like 6 on a Friday, drive to mum and dad's and stay there till Sunday. I'm going to Mauritius with them. I went to St. Lucia with them last year. I spent loads of time with mum and dad. Moved back there, and I realized there was a little bit more to life, I think, than work. I'd kind of felt like I've been in this little bit of this, like, really high pressure kind of commercial bubble. You know, I was living in my flat in town, working, blah, blah, blah. Moved back there. I spent 9 months there. So I moved back on March 23rd, actually coincident the previous week. It was actually the week before the lockdown. We didn't know what was going to happen, but I just moved back for a week anyway. I ended up staying till New Year's Day. I moved back to my flat on New Year's Day. And realized it wasn't quite what I wanted to do long term, wasn't, you know, really aligned with the kind of life I wanted to leave myself, or, you know, not sound ostentatious, but the kind of legacy I wanted longer term. This was of course compounded by my dad telling me it was hollow every kind of 2 or 3 hours. So there was also that. So yeah, I quit.
Yeah. And how do you so tell me what early careers does and what the foundation does and will do. So you've got 2 very distinct strands to your organization.
Cool, sure. So early careers company started at the start of last year. It was just me and hire number 1, Zoe. So Zoe's actually someone I worked with back at Wiser ages ago. So she was an industrial placement student in my team, and we remained really close friends ever since. She came and joined on day 1. So it was just me and her sitting there. So I was there, she was there for the first few months. The company basically does 2 things. So on one side of the business, it's like strategy consulting for early careers. So we call it the strategy development. So we help clients build or develop the infrastructure they have around emerging talent. The work there is all focused on a few key areas. So diversity, retention, engagement, performance, and like future leader pipelines. So I mean, I won't go into too much depth, but we build graduate programs, we redesign assessment processes, we help companies rebuild the frameworks of the characteristics and capabilities they look for to drive diverse hiring and widen the net. We work on kind of employer value propositions and help them reframe who they are and how they talk about what they do. So there's a lot around, you know, building the infrastructure to make allow them to create great careers and make early careers work. The other side of the business is talent delivery. So we call it that just to avoid the word recruitment. So my last company was a relatively like commission driven recruitment business. And I just didn't really want that. So we deliver hiring campaigns, mostly quite large scale. So we'll help companies with, develop and run assessment centers for early careers hiring across. At the moment, it's across about a third across the UK, EU, and US. A very small amount of our work's in APAC. We do some work across like Tokyo, Seoul, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore, and so on. So the key things to note is, again, with the swearing on the podcast, I'm glad I asked, there's just no like recruitment bullshit. There's no commission, there's no sales culture, there's no individual work, there's no revenue targets, KPIs, metrics. It's all built around us having project teams. So we might have Team Pleo. It's one of our biggest clients from earlier this year. Team Pleo is led by a project lead. There's a big like collaborative project team that will execute on the campaign. So that's the business. It's gone quite well. So we're up to 33 people globally now. So we're nearly 18 months in. We'll be 18 months in a couple of weeks. So we'll be 8 people. And we opened an office in Mumbai last October. So we'll be 8 in Mumbai and 25 in London. Actually, probably more by that point, 28 in London, something like that.
And before we get onto the foundation, actually, there's something that you'll think I spend my whole life stalking your LinkedIn, but you put a post together saying, I've started a business, there was like £865 in the bank. And he said, you were turning over $1 million 18 months later. And what I loved about what you did was somebody tried to put you in your place in the comments. And I think...
Yeah, I remember that. What a dick.
I know. But what I just loved about it, because obviously you are much younger than me. So you're still in your 20s, yeah?
26, yeah.
Yeah, you're 26, right?
Nearly 27.
Yeah, right. Oh my God, I'm 20 years older than you. And I was just thinking that here was someone going, I'm going to put you in your place, young man. And you put something like, well, it's not really professional to talk about EBITDA on LinkedIn. And I was just like, yes. You just showed him
the guys
that
come and said, like, turnover is just talking about your turnover is just vanity. And I just thought, well, I'm not going to talk about our profit on LinkedIn. Am I? It's just so inappropriate.
Yeah.
It's still quite a good measure of success.
And I thought the way you handled it, just like it. Oh, it was brilliant. You could tell there were people going, yes.
Yeah, I got lots of likes and that's great. I think,
Yeah.
honestly, that sums up kind of our attitude and approach. So not to quote my wonderful mum again, but she came out with a phrase. So I bought myself a nice watch. So we hit £1 million revenue last year.
Yeah.
I bought myself and actually the two members of our leadership team like nice watches. I
Yeah.
sent a photo, and the brother who just walked into my flat and made me a coffee, he didn't come over just to do that, but my brother who's come over and made me a coffee, I posted a photo of the watch in the family chat, and he's like, "What are you doing, Dan? You run a social mobility charity, like why would you spend that much money on a watch?" And my mum, I went back and said, the point there about talking about, we've generated like £1.5 million in revenue this quarter, and we did $1 million in our first year from nothing. And I'm quite proud to talk about that, because I don't
Yeah.
believe that making the world a better place and being commercially successful and having nice things and driving fast cars, they're not mutually exclusive. You can make a lot of money and be a good person. And I think that's kind of the narrative we have at the company. My mum's reply to my brother's comment about my watch was, making the most of what the world has to offer doesn't mean you can't try and improve it, which I really liked. My dad then said, "Fuck off, Barb. Dan is just trying to square off his greed with his conscience." Take your pick as to what's correct there, but that's kind of the idea. We want to build an amazing business where people can thrive, have fantastic careers, earn good money, get, earn big bonuses when the company succeeds. We have free company Uber accounts, Deliveroo. I'm taking the entire team on a 7-day 5-star retreat to Mexico.
Wow.
We have a company electric car people can book for free. We've got full private health insurance, mental health, global travel insurance. Like we don't believe, like, you don't have to choose between improving things and enjoying them.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. You're right. Tell me about the foundation. What is it? Why did you? Well, I guess, yeah. Why did it come about, and what will it do for people?
It came about after like lots of thinking of like what, this sounds really grandiose, but the thoughts after I left Wise were not like, what do I want to do? It was almost like, what type of person do I want to be? Do I now want to go and get a good job at a big company and make lots of money and drive a fast car, or do I want to like do something I'm really proud of?
Yeah.
So the foundation, I was going to go into more depth about how it came about, but basically the foundation is an independent social mobility charity. So it is not a part of the company, legally speaking. We talk about them being part of the same group, but it is an independent charity. It's got its own board of trustees. You'll know, like, charities aren't like owned, they're held in trust.
Yeah.
It's entirely funded by the business. So the foundation is completely funded by the company. We don't take any external donations. We actually, we do get offered them. We were offered a £25,000 grant from a company and turned it down. The reason, I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but it's kind of like our legacy. And it feels a bit like, I don't know, I'm dating someone and they're coming over for dinner and I ask them to like bring the chicken. It feels a bit like that. Like, I want it to be like what we're doing and the way we are giving back. And also not taking or accepting grants gives us like, it doesn't give us impartiality, but it gives us like, it allows us to be honest. We can go to a corporate partner. We're partnered up with Salesforce and Google and British Airways and Bentley and Fidelity and Barclays and Henkel and De Beers and Spotify and all these companies. We're partnered up with all these organizations, and we don't ask for a penny from them, which A, means they do it because everyone says yes when it's free, but B, it also means that we're not in it for the money, where we're genuinely doing it like there's no gain for us in this. So it's an independent social mobility charity. It's got its own board of 9 trustees. I'm one, my mum is another, in her capacity as a psychologist and education expert, rather than my mum. So the foundation does 3 things. So it's all around using careers to advance social mobility. My belief is that early careers is an unbelievable tool to advance sort of socioeconomic equality, not inequality, don't advance that, to advance equality. And the reason is that I had a friend from school, actually wasn't a friend of a friend, and he had quite a challenging upbringing, grew up on a local council estate, never really achieved his potential, but was always a really bright guy. Didn't go to went to university, but didn't go to a good uni, didn't study a good degree, didn't get a good grade. Ended up, I don't quite know how, but made it onto the JP Morgan grad scheme. And when I asked him about like, does your background ever hold you back? He said, quote, "Mate, I work at JP Morgan and I have for 3 years. No one gives a shit what I did before." And I realized at that point, like, that's incredibly powerful. If you end up getting a great first job, it can right a lot of wrongs, but it's a really big fork in the road, that first job. So we seek to advance social mobility by giving young people from low-income families the tools and experience, exposure, confidence, aspiration, and financial support they need to get a good first job. It's all around that.
Yeah. I think that it's very true. It's true what you say. And that was certainly my experience. And if you can do that early, like you say, if you can get good first job, makes a world of difference. Stops you being trapped in a
Exactly right.
cycle. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's what it's
Yeah.
all about. We have a big learning program. So those corporate partners, we're building with the help of a company called Knology, we are building a kind of like the Duolingo of careers. It'll be like a really interactive, like gamified learning app where you can study investment banking by JP Morgan and then M&A by Deutsche Bank and so on and so forth. We're also running a big mentoring program, and it's quite large scale. Like we hope to have 10,000 kids on the program using the app and 2,000 being mentored by the end of next year. So the mentoring program and finally a grant fund.
Wow. And what do you think has sort of held you in good stead throughout your experiences so far? I mean, you talked about that, focusing. I hate it. I can't think of it. Working even harder when times are tough. But what would you say has kind of been the things that you think have helped you to kind of get to where you are?
I think it's probably 4.
Yeah.
I hope I don't think of any more when I go for 3. First one is like a pretty like resolute attitude. That shut the fuck up and get on with it has always just been my way of working. I mean, last few weeks I've been lucky enough to have a few little trips abroad and so on, and have a little bit more time to myself, as fantastic people in my business have been stepping up, and I've been able to just step back, for a couple of weekends. But for the last 18 months, I reckon I probably worked a 90-hour week on average. I've been working 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday to Friday, and about a 10-hour day on Sunday.
Yeah,
that's an 80-hour week. It turns out, not 90. I've also always had brilliant people around me in my business. I've got Nick and Zoe, Lily, Richard, Olivia. Some, they're like the management team in the business, and they're amazing, talented people. And even though they work for me, I learn from them a lot and get a lot of support from them. Same in my old business. I had Omar, who I'm still very close to, and he still does a lot of work supporting me and us. He's also my best mate, or one of my best mates. I have people around that learn from me. I've also had people around that I can learn from. Really lovely life outside of work. I don't really believe in the concept of work-life balance. That implies they're two separate things and they need to trade off. I've always thought of like, work-life integration. My work is part of my life. My, a big part of my personality is my work and my career and so on. And people around me have always understood that. I've also got a really close family, as you probably guessed in the last 40 minutes or so. Whenever things have been tough, I can just hop in the car, drive home 45 minutes away, and my dad's got a lovely meal for me on the table and a bottle of red wine. So there's always been a lot of kind of emotional support around work, because it is stressful and it's isolating and difficult at times. I'm a sole founder and run my own company, and although I've got great people around me, like my mentor Kath, who's always helped, you still need a bit of family around from time to time, and I recognize I'm very, very lucky to have that compared to a lot of people. I don't know if that's 4 or not. I can't remember the rest.
That was 4. Yes. Yeah.
So.
I'm still sat at your parents' dining table with the chicken that I didn't have to bring and a bottle of wine.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're big foodies in my household, and my dad typically just cooks for 4. So any night, any day I've had a difficult day, I just get in the car, go home.
Yeah, that's really lovely. You mentioned your mentor there. How did you find? Did you say Kath? Yeah. How did you find her?
She worked for a business called the Chemistry Group, which was 2 floors above us in that pokey first office. So I met her back in 2015. I think we might have met in a lift or something. I don't really know. I think she heard me talking loudly on the phone and got chatting. She's like a behavior and profiling expert. So she ran this big kind of skills and competency profiling exercise with me, and then has been a supporter ever since. She's now the chair of the board of trustees of the charity. She's an NED. She's an equity holding non-exec director of the company. She's in about 1 million group chats. I talk to her every day. She coaches about 5 of my team and some of my mates. We do a load of work together, but she's amazing. And again, she's a good example, someone who's kind of, unconditionally supports me, whether I'm making bad decisions or good ones. And is also a bit of an inspiration to herself. I posted about her too. She never got married, so adopted 2 kids, one of which has quite serious kind of learning difficulties, and has built a multi-million-pound business and bought a fantastic house and built a family on her own. And still somehow finds time to deal with me for 45 minutes a day.
That's fantastic. I think there's just so much. I could, well, listen to you for a very long time, and I'm just kind of inspired, like that energy that you've got. I'm like, maybe it is. I wish I was 26 again, but I love how you just. I don't
That's
know.
probably the ADHD more than anything. But yeah, thanks.
Ah,
That and the two coffees.
yeah. I know. 2 coffees. I might go for my third. Okay. Is that something? So you mentioned ADHD, just as you've mentioned it, because I know people might go, "Oh, that's interesting." Is that something you knew you had when you were younger?
I should clarify. That was a
Mm.
very recent, almost quite flippant diagnosis from a psychiatrist. They ran some tests. It's the H rather than the D. I can focus for ages, but yeah, I mean, I suppose it always has been. I've always found it difficult to focus on something for a long time. I find it, I work incredibly quickly. I type fast, I talk fast, I do everything quite fast. I'm always on overdrive. But so I have 2 screens at the office, 2 big monitors, and I struggle to write one. I do things quickly because if I don't, I get distracted. But what I typically do is I'll do 3 things at once. So I'll write part of an email, then send an invoice, then I'll check something on social media or whatever, and I'll cycle between the 3. No, again, it was a nightmare for me in school, constantly interrupting and talking too quickly and for too long. It's still something I'm working on, honestly. Like I'm talking now to someone who's clearly very extroverted and confident and interesting, but I equally recognize there are times when I will over talk and over people and can make people who are a little bit less confident in themselves feel shy and it can be a bit overwhelming and so on. So I still have to work on it. Kat helps me a lot with that. But there's a limit to what I can do about it.
Yeah, and I'm excited. I guess there's part of me, there's so much I sort of take from this, which is about that sort of accepting yourself and trusting yourself and playing to your strengths and knowing where to go for support. I guess I'll finish with, because I'm respectful of your time. What's next? What's next for you? What's next that you can talk about?
Christ. There you go. Finish on an easy question. I don't know. I mean, just this. I have no ambition to do anything else now. I don't know. I've maybe seen myself in politics. I honestly have no idea. I absolutely love what I'm doing now. I don't know. I love what I'm doing now so much. I love the people I'm doing it with. I think my motivations have changed a bit. I've kind of got to the point, not like I've made it. Bullshit. I'm still managing a really small business, but I say, pretty small business. But I think what's next for me is trying to create the best platform I possibly can. I don't mean like technology, but the best platform I can to accelerate others' careers. If you think about everything in my world, the reason I'm in careers is because I'm a socialist and I'm a pretty passionate capitalist. And I know the two don't really go hand in hand, but I'm left wing, but I like nice things. And I've realized that if you like business and the commercial world and wealth creation and so on, and you also care about making the world a better place, then careers is where those 2 areas meet, right? It's where the business world meets real people and can change real lives. So I've got no real ambitions to move out of this space at all. I really like it. I find it really interesting. I obviously can't talk about company strategy in too much depth, but we're going to continue growing both here and abroad. We're going to be launching new service lines and new products, potentially new partnerships. It's hard to say exactly, but I would like, I've got some amazing people around me. I'd like to build them into incredibly talented global leaders. Well, they are talented, but very capable global leaders. And then, of course, build the charity. I'd like the charity to be, an 8-figure income global social mobility charity.
Wow. Just awesome. I'm glad that I managed to just capture a sliver of your day to day. And
me too. I hope I didn't talk too much after both the morning coffees.
No. And I will put the links to how people can connect with your organization in the show notes.
Please do.
Thanks, Dan.
No worries. Cheers.